Hey, I want to speak to you this morning about B goals, what I call B goals, B-E, B goals. You can follow along on your phone. We've got some things on the screen that you guys can look at. Coming into 2018, I always look as we're coming into a new year. It's hard for me to look past in the old year and think about the things we accomplished or we didn't accomplish, or the past is hard for me to look at. I'm always looking in the future. I'm one of those kind of guys that believes that next week is going to be the breakthrough, that next month is going to be the breakthrough, the next year is going to be the breakthrough. I always believe that the greatest is ahead of us. It's hard for me to go back and mully-grub and reminisce about things that are in our past. I'm always looking forward to where we're going. And I tell you, here at Faith Church, wow, what a unbelievable year that we just had. We've set some goals with our ministry of things that we would like to achieve and places that we would like to be ministering in and things we'd like to do. And we've achieved almost every one of those goals. One of our big goals that we've had at this church for years and years and years was to be able to reach 200 in attendance. And over the month of December, we were over 200 in attendance for the whole month of December. If we averaged all the Sundays together, we were over 200 for those months. Now we have other goals. Financially, we met our goals. Hey, we moved from a different part of town to this building and are here now. We've had a lot of goals that we've accomplished. But just to tell you the truth, I am not a very big goal person. Not that I don't think they're important. It's just hard for me to stick to goals. Are you guys like that? Anybody else like that? You'll admit to that? It's just hard for me to stick to goals. I like setting goals. I like throwing them out there, but it's so hard to keep with those specific goals. And I know some people that are everything's a goal, you know. Everything, they got to have goals for this and goals for that, goals for their day. And I'm more power to you. I've tried to do that. I just can't get that going that direction. And I admire you guys for that. I'm just not wired that way. I've got to be inspired sometimes before I can have a goal that I really want to achieve. So coming into this new year, everybody makes New Year's resolutions. Have you guys made New Year's resolutions yet? Anybody made them yet? How many of you think you'll make New Year's resolutions? How many have made New Year's resolutions in the past? All right. Just about all of us have. How many your New Year's resolutions would be different this year than what they would have been 5 years ago? How many of your New Year's resolutions would be the same this year as they were 5 years ago? Yeah? Lose weight, get a better job. Hang on, no, that was not mine. Okay, lose weight. Lose weight, get out of debt, exercise more. You know, it's those typical things. Well, I did a search on the internet and I found the top 10 New Year's resolutions. I've got them here on the screen so you can see them. And I may need a magnifying glass to see what they are. I'm just going to turn it around. Okay, get organized, help others, learn something new, get out of debt, exercise, more family time, quit smoking, lose weight, quit drinking, enjoy life more. Some of you are saying, well, how does that enjoy life more go with quit drinking? Because they seem like that they're connected together. Well, they're not, okay? And so here are top 10 things that people say that this is the things I want to quit doing. I want to change in my life. These are things that I'm doing now that I want to change, or things I'm not doing now that I want to start doing. And that's kind of what New Year's resolutions are about. And people are going to make New Year's resolutions all over the world coming up today and tomorrow. Huge resolutions. Everybody's going to do it. But I found some statistics on keeping New Year's resolutions. Listen to this. 50% of adults in North America will make New Year's resolutions this year. But listen to this. Most people fail in adhering to their stated New Year's resolutions. Specifically, 22 people fail after 1 week. 22% fail after 1 week. 40% after a month. 50% of the 50% who made them, 50% of those will fail after 3 months, and 60% after 6 months, and 81% of these people will fail in keeping their New Year's resolutions 24 months later. So you can look at that and say, you know what? We're not real good at keeping our New Year's resolutions at all. Just as a human race, we're just not good at it. We make promises. We like going that direction. It feels good. It looks good. But the fact is that we're just not good at keeping those New Year's resolutions. Now, why is that? Andy Stanley, in one of his books that I've been reading and studying called The Next Generation Leader, talks about the process of setting goals and why it's important for us to set goals. what kind of goals that we should set. But he makes a statement in there that I really think is really, really important for us to talk about. And he said there is a difference between setting what kind of goals we do in goals that are doing goals or goals that are being goals. Do goals or be goals. And he says, here's the thing, before you can ever set what you're going to do, you must first understand who you are and what you're going to be. If I can understand who I am, if I can understand what I want to become, then it determines on what I'm going to do. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm a professional football player. I play on the offensive line of the Atlanta Falcons. I don't know, I'm just throwing that one out there since the Dallas Cowboys, I'm not using them as references anymore. Listen, I'm in the Atlanta Falcons, I'm an offensive lineman. We actually had a guy that attended church here that went to be an offensive lineman for Atlanta Falcons. And let's say I'm planning and that's who I am. That's what I'm going to be. Can I tell you that my goals in what I'm going to achieve that year are going to be very specific? I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to study game films. I'm going to eat everything I possibly can. I'm going to lift weights. I'm going to become smarter. I'm going to get someone who can manage my money because I'm going to make so much money I don't know what to do with it all. I've got my goals are directed that way. Now, it's a lot different if you're going to be a runway model. Let's say I'm going to be a runway model for some famous magazine. I'm going to wear all kinds of nice clothes, look like Connor over here, and I'm going to be all buff and good looking. You know what? His goals, threw him under the bus there. His goals are completely different from what the offensive lineman's goals are going to be because he has a specific frame in mind. He has a specific physique in mind. He's not going to eat everything he wants. He's going to lift weights. He's going to be conscious about the way he looks. He's going to make sure that all those things are together. In the same way, we as people have to know what we are going to be before we know how we're going to do it. So my thing is to say to you, the first thing we need to do in establishing goals for the new year is to understand who you are. How do I know who I am? Well, let's take that a step farther. Determine who you want to become. Determine who you want to become. The type of person that you want to be will establish the things that you do. So if we have goals here, we can set some goals that are average goals that would just say, these are do goals. Lose weight, get out of debt, drink less, quit smoking, get some goals. That's another goal, all right? Those are doing. Those are things that we do. We are going to reach out and try to do these things, but we have a whole nother set that are called be goals. And what are those? Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, probably a lot of you guys have read that book. His second habit that he talks about in this book, he talks specifically about this, begin with the end in mind. Some of you guys remember if you've read the book, begin with the end in mind. He gives a scenario and he says, I want you to imagine that you're at a funeral. And at this funeral, you walk down to the front to the casket and realize that that's you in that casket. This is your funeral. Now you sit back and you listen to all the comments that people are going to make about you. Your wife gets up and she talks about you. Your kids, each one get up and they talk about you. The people you work with, they get up and they talk about you. Your neighbors talk about you. Your parents are there and they get up and talk about you. What kind of things do you want the people in your life to say at the end of your life? If you could determine what they would say at the end of your life, if we could sit down today and I give you a piece of paper and I say, I want to give you the next, say, hour or 2 hours, and I want you to write down a script for every person in your life of what they would say at your funeral, what would that script be like? What would that script be like? Well, he gave me a bunch of stuff. He had lots of money. He was the skinniest guy I know. He had great abs. He exercised every day. He ran all the time. Is that the things that your family are going to talk about at your funeral? No, they're not going to talk about that. They're going to talk about who you are. He was a man of character. He was an honest person. The most loving person I've ever met. I don't know if you guys have ever recognized it, but when you're watching the news and they interview a family member of someone who's passed away tragically or whatever, that family member, they always say, he was the kindest man I've ever met in my life. He smiled all the time. Well, that's impossible, but he smiled all the time. He'd give you the shirt right off his back. And that's how we do a lot of times. We take that person who's passed and we remember the greatest, the most noble traits about that person. We don't remember the bad stuff. We don't talk about that kind of stuff. We talk about the good stuff that maybe they weren't completely, but that's what we recognized in them. And I'm saying when we start with the end in mind, what we start doing is we start looking at what do I want people to see me as, and then let me at this point in my life begin to direct my life that direction so that what I'm becoming determines what I'm doing. Does that make sense to you guys? What I am becoming and who I am as a person determines the things that I'm going to do. So let me give you 3 things that will help you do this. Number 1 is this. Before you decide what you're going to do in 2018, you first must decide what you're going to be. So here's what you need to do. If you'll stop and think about what characteristics that you want in your life. I sit down and wrote just a few in my life, and obviously this is just a few, and there could be a lot more, but I thought of the first thing, I want people to know me as a person who's honest. You know, honesty is crucial to everything in life. In fact, honesty has to be some of the stuff that matters in our lives. I want to be someone who has a pure life. I want to be perceived by other people and in my own life have a life that's pure. I want the people who are the closest to me to vouch for that, to know that I have a pure life. I want to have a life that has character, that I can look back on what I've achieved and what I've accomplished in my life and know that I did it with character. Loyalty is another thing. I want people to know and I want to be loyal to the people who are around me. And then the last one is happy. I want to be happy. I want to be happy. Sometimes church members aren't happy. Do you notice that? Sometimes we're not happy. We're mad because we don't get to do a lot of stuff. And we don't understand why we don't get to do a lot of stuff. We just know we don't get to do it. I don't know why, but we just don't get to. And if you're not careful, it can make you bitter and it can make you complaining and complacent and irritable all the time in life because there's so many things that we want to achieve and we want to do in life, but it seems like we can't. I want to find the joy in why I do what I do. The average person, if you talk to them about their lives, we saw a person the other night, a friend that I hadn't seen in a long time, and we saw her at a restaurant, and Lisa and I stopped and said, hey, it's good to see you. How's things going? Whew, she told us, you know? So the next 10 minutes, we're hearing about her, you know, hospital stays and her son's sickness and her husband's sickness and all the sicknesses that she's been through in the last 30 years and all that. And we thought, wow, we asked, so we kind of got it. But in their mindset, that's what's important to them, is that people know what they've achieved and what they've gone through and where they're at. And if we're not careful, we can get into this mindset that is only affected by what immediately affects us. If it feels good, do it. Let's get out there and go for it. My life is only controlled by the pleasures that I get in the now, in the moment, in what I'm going through next. I don't stop to consider about my life. You know, I hear a lot of kids say, live hard and die young. You know, I want to go out. I want to go live. I want to live my life. I heard a person say on television the other day, they said, I don't expect to live past 27 years old because I don't want to be old. Just wanted to punch him. I don't want to be old. So I don't expect to live past. So I'm going to live my life. I'm going to run it hard. I'm going to burn it hard. And then one day I'm going to die and I'm going to be gone. And I think, you know what? What a shallow concept, what an immature concept of what life is. Number one, that life ends at 27. I'm here to tell you that life just begins at 27. You don't know what you're getting into until you get through some of the things in life. You don't know what real love is until you've gone through some hard times. You don't know what joy is until you've seen sorrow, until you've seen heartache, until you've gone through the valleys. I don't know what perseverance is until I've gone through some hard times, until I've been with people through the hospital. I've been through deaths. I've been through things in my life where I've got something in my life that now I can give to people. Anybody else like that? Anybody else like that? You get tired of talking to people who just have such trite and such small little issues in their life. You want to think, you know what? If you only knew what people go through and they still have a smile on their face, there's only one way that can happen, is that they have the love of Christ that's inside of them. So how do we do that? The first thing is that you need to decide that you're going to be a beer instead of a doer, all right? I'm gonna be a be person. I'm gonna make be goals instead of do goals. Here's the second one. Why does it matter? And here's how you help write those goals. Why does it matter? What are the outcomes? You have to ask yourself this. What are the outcomes if I don't achieve this? And I wrote this specifically, and I know the English is incorrect, but you'll understand what I'm doing. What are the outcomes if I don't be this? What are the outcomes if I don't be it? Not if I don't do this, but what are the outcomes if I don't be this? In other words, honesty, for one, let's take one of the first traits. Honesty is the basis of what trust is, and trust is the glue that holds all relationships together. Honesty is the basis of what a relationship consists of. If I can't be honest, or if I'm dishonest with someone, I begin to break down that relationship. I begin to tear that relationship apart. But when I can be honest with someone, completely honest, number one, it purges me of my guilt. It purges me of the things that are going on inside of me. And it helps the person that I'm being honest with learn to trust me, because now we have a relationship that's deeper than I'm okay, you're okay. Now we have a relationship that says, listen, I got flaws, you got flaws, all right? That's honesty. So we want to be honest with each other, and honesty has to be the basis of that. So what is my life like if I'm not honest? My life, if I'm not honest, my life is continually running from those people that I'm being dishonest to. It's running from family. It's running from friends. It's running from employers. It's running from employees because I can't remember what I told them last if I'm not being honest with them. It's running from the law. It's trying to stay underneath the radar for as long as I can. Being dishonest can cost you way more than being honest can. And so I have to stop and understand, if I'm gonna have something that I'm gonna become, I need to know, why is that important for me to become that? So honesty is important. Here's the second one, purity. Purity is the number one ingredient in intimacy. When I learn purity in my life, and when I practice purity in my life, I learn intimacy with my wife. I learn intimacy with that person that I'm in love with, that I'm spending my life with. If my life is not pure, if my relationships with other people are not pure, if my thought life is not pure, if my actions are not pure, what it does is that it takes away from the level of intimacy and closeness that you can have with another person. If when we're younger, our life is continually not pure and we're always looking to ways to gratify the flesh and take care of our needs, and it's all immediate gratification, what happens is that we're sacrificing on the closeness and the intimacy that we can have with a person at one point in our lives when we do first with them. If all your firsts were experienced while you're in college or in high school, if all your first experiences were experienced with people that you'll never know and never see again, or you try to avoid, then when you come to a spouse, your firsts have already been completed and you don't have that closeness, that intimacy. That's why the scripture is so specific about us being pure in our personal lives, in our sexual lives, in our thought lives, having that purity that one day we could give that to a person that we've waited for, and we tell them, listen, it was tough waiting for you. It was tough keeping myself for you, but I kept myself for you so that you would be the person that I could express all my intimacy. Folks, this is a dying concept. I know some of you are looking at me like, are you nuts? It's a dying concept, I realize that. And we don't hear it enough in the church, and we don't understand why we do it. All we know is the Bible says don't have sex before marriage. But why is that? Here's the reason. Here's one of the reasons. Because you sacrifice the closeness and the intimacy that you have. Why do you think our divorce rate in America or in Oklahoma is 50% and growing? Because of these kind of principles. Because we want to take the immediate and we don't want to go back and look at the facts on what really happens here. And when we go back and really ask, what are the outcomes going to be if I don't do this? Well, these are the outcomes. Here's another one. Because character determines what I do in my private world. I want to make sure I have character in my life, because character determines what I do in my private world. Character keeps me on the close path. Character keeps me on the pure path. Character keeps me going down the direction that I need to go. When I say I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it. And even if I don't verbally say I'm gonna do something, the character inside of me keeps me from doing things that I know that I shouldn't do because I've got character, because I've got determination, because I've made some commitments to God and I'm gonna keep with those commitments. When you're alone, when you're in private, when you have no one who is pouring into your life or no one that you can become honest with and vulnerable with, your character can completely go out the window and you can live your life the way you want to, thinking that no one knows. But can I tell you, everybody around you will eventually know what the character is of your life. If you're gonna develop character, it has to start in your private world. And the last one, my loyalty is determined by the value I put on other people. My loyalty in my life is determined by the value I put on other people. Listen, I could just write these characters down and say, yeah, these are the things I want to accomplish. But if I'll stop and look back and say, why is that? What's the importance of character? What's the importance of loyalty? And if I don't have character and loyalty, what does that mean in my life? I'm going to find out real quick that the things I want to accomplish in my life have purpose, they have meaning. The things I want to become are things that have purpose to them. Let's go to the Bible and look at some examples in here. Daniel, the 6th chapter. I had you turn to this portion of Scripture. Daniel, the 6th chapter. And I want to start reading right in the first verse. And let me read down a few verses here. Daniel 6, starting in verse number 1. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps to rule throughout the kingdom. These were like little militiamen. These were like little governors, little eyeballs for the king that he could go out and they could go out and be able to tell what's going on. Kind of, like his people who would go out and keep watch over everything, judges, if you want to call them that. With 3 administrators over them, one of whom was Daniel. The satraps were made accountable to them so that the king might not suffer loss. Now, Daniel so distinguished himself above the administrators and the satraps by his exceptional qualities that the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. At this, the administrators and the satraps tried to find grounds for charges against Daniel in the conduct of his government affairs, but they were unable to do so. They could find no corruption in him because he was trustworthy and neither corrupt nor negligent. Finally, these men said, we will never find any basis for charges against this man, Daniel, unless it has something to do with the law of his God. So what they're saying here is that, listen, we've gone through his life, we've searched him, and we looked closely at him, and we found there's nothing wrong with him. And God gave this man character. God gave Daniel character. God gave Daniel loyalty. God helped him through this process. So we come to understand that my developing character and my developing loyalty is not just something that I decide to go and do. It's something that God helps me with. He helps me develop those. And when I choose to follow the laws of God and the directions of God, the outcome of that is that he develops these characteristics in my life that I want to become. Every person in the world wants these kind of characteristics in their life. They want these kind of qualities, and it only comes through the power of God in our lives. That's how we develop that in our lives. And here Daniel is this person who's saying, listen, I'm gonna do my best, I'm gonna work my hardest, and as I do that, then all those people around him saw that he had character and he had qualities that they didn't. And I think it's interesting here that they determined that they were gonna start looking for him. You know, it's like guys who run for political office. I have no idea why they would want to do that. Because when you run for political office, they are going to say all kinds of things about you, and they're even going to make up some. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know what they're making up and what's true anymore. I don't know. I watch television. I hear some people say this is true, and some people say this isn't true. I don't know. It's a he said, she said stuff in some of these things. But if you'll stop and look at a person's character, if you look at the qualities that they have, you'll quickly understand who's telling the truth and who's not telling the truth. Here's the thing. I want my life to be lived to the extent that when someone said a falsity about me, something that wasn't true, other people would laugh at it. Let me say it again. I want my life and my character to be such that if someone made up a lie about me, other people would laugh because they say, that's not his character. That's not him. That's not him. When you say it, I can listen to what you say, but I know right off the bat, that's not true because that's not him. Because I know his quality, I know his character. I want that to be said about me. Now, I don't know if it is. You guys will have to be the judge of that. But I want to live above reproach that when people say something about me, everybody else knows that it's untrue because of the quality of life that I live. So here's Daniel's life. Let me ask you this. If someone did a full investigation on your life, what would they find? If someone did a full investigation on your life, if they followed you around for a week and saw everywhere you went, after work, the places you went on the internet, the conversations you have on your phone and texting or Snapchat, if they could watch your Snapchat for 1 week, what would they find? Would they find someone who is above reproach? Or would they find somebody who's hiding some things in their life, has a secret life that you don't want anybody to know about? How would that be? People who have, it's awful quiet in here. Are you guys okay? Is it too warm? Some of you guys are, I could turn it down a little bit and it'd be a little cooler and you guys would be a little more brisk this morning. I don't mean to step on your toes, but I'm just saying, let's look at these things in our lives, all right? Let's look at that and make sure that my life is the same in private as it is in public. Here's the second person I want to look at, Joseph. Look, turn back to Genesis, the 39th chapter. We've got a few scriptures that we're going to look at here. Genesis, the 39th chapter. Genesis 39, talking about Joseph and his life here. Let me just show you a couple of the characteristics of Joseph and his life. Joseph, chapter 39, verse number 2. The Lord was with Joseph, and he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. This was Potiphar. We know what happened with that, but we understand that Potiphar took a young man that was traded as a slave and saw the character in his life, saw the qualities in his life, saw these things of not what he did, but who he was. Do you know that who you are determines what you do? What I do on the outside begins on the inside, all right? Where I go starts with a conviction that I have in my heart about who I am on the inside. So we begin to understand and see those qualities and characters that come out in these men. Look down to verse number 23. Verse number 23. Well, that ain't the one I wanted. Look at verse number 20. Joseph's master took him and put him in the prison and placed him where the prisoners are. Okay, verse number 22. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all. That's not the one I wanted either. Okay, I can't remember what scripture I was. I didn't underline it in my Bible. But here's the thing. When we see Joseph's life, we understand that from place to place, God began to prosper him. And no matter if he was in prison, God rose him to the top. No matter if he was in a bad situation, a slave, God rose him to the top. And even when we get to the later part of his life here in Genesis, chapter 41, verse 41 says this. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring, put it on his finger, and put it on Joseph's finger. Took it from his finger, put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put gold chains around his neck. He had him ride in the chariot as his second in command. The men shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. So we see the way that Joseph's life began to prosper, the way that everyone around him saw great qualities in him, the way that they recognize that and they begin to promote him and put him in places of authority. Isn't that what we want in our lives? Don't we want people to see those kind of things in us? That if we do, we need to live our life with the end in mind. Let me ask you this question. What would the people you work with or the closest to you say about your honesty, purity, character, qualities, and loyalty? What would the people who are the closest to you say about you? Would they compliment you? I've heard way too many people when I say, oh, you work for so-and-so. Oh, yeah, man, they're a mess. I've seen this, I've seen that. And obviously, you can see anything you want to sometimes. But the quality and the character of their lives, do you see a work ethic? Do you see someone who is achieving something? Do you see someone who loves their wife, who loves their kids, who loves their spouse? Do you see someone who has qualities and characters in their life? It's easy to see. You guys, if you'll think about the people you work with, you know the people who have character and the people who don't, right? Am I right? Do you know that? So it's important that we find those things. Let me keep going and go just a little bit further. So where do we get these characteristics? Where do we develop these at? Well, unfortunately, universities don't teach character. Universities don't teach honesty. They do in the whole scope of what they teach. I mean, they want you to be honest, and it's within the core values of that, but we don't learn these kind of things in universities. You're not gonna find it at the mall, all right? There's not a shop that sells character. There's not a shop that sells honesty. You know, the honesty, you go in and buy it, and there's not anything like that. They have some posters or something in there that may kind of pull it out. But here's the thing. You can come to church, and we on a weekly basis teach it to you for free. You can come and bring your kids and put them in the nurseries, and they'll feed them Kool-Aid and crackers, and we'll take care of them. While you come in for free, you can sit and listen to the premises of the Word of God that teach character and honesty and responsibility and loyalty. That's what this is. This is where you learn this kind of stuff at. This is the stuff that's going to benefit you at the end of your life. This is where you're going to learn that. You're going to learn it right here in a situation here at the church. Jesus even taught this. Let me show you some scriptures, and I won't have you turn to these. If you want to turn to them, you can, but you can write them down. Matthew 18:3, listen to this. Truly I say to you, unless you become like little children, you'll never enter in the kingdom of heaven. He says, he doesn't say unless you act like little children, which some of you need to get that right, all right? It's not acting, it's becoming. Unless you become. He's talking about being. Unless you have the faith, unless you have the belief of a little child, the vulnerability of a little child, the servant attitude of a little child, unless you do that, you're never going to enter in the kingdom of heaven, is what Christ says. Look at these other words of him talking about becoming. Follow me and I will make you become like fishers of men, is what the scripture says. If you'll follow me, he didn't say, if you'll follow me, you're going to be a fisher, or you're going to be a fisher of men. He said, but if you'll follow me, you'll become. It's being. It's what I'm going to be. It's what I'm going to do and be in my life. It's not just my actions, but it's what's on the inside. Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. He's saying that my character is transferred into you, and when that is transferred into your life, now you can become the person that God has intended for you to be. I hope you guys are getting this and not just sleeping through it. Number three is this, the last one. Take time this week to begin with the end in mind. Take time this week to write down some goals of what you want to be, some B goals. What things in my life do I want to become? At the end of my life, if I'm looking at my funeral service, what is that going to look like? How do I want to become the person that I'm going to become? Success is not determined by the size of your bank account when you die or the number of things that you have. Instead, success is determined by the fulfillment of what is said at your funeral. Success is determined by the fulfillment of what is said at your funeral. In fact, Stephen Covey is famous for saying this: if you carefully consider what you want to be said, of you and your funeral experience, you will find your definition of success. So he says, if you'll stop and study that, what will they say at your funeral? If you'll figure that out, that defines success for you. Your success will be what you are going to be at the end of your life. So start with that end in mind and work backwards. When I was younger and we lived in Norman, I had a family in my church that asked me to go pray for their grandfather who was in the hospital. They said, he's in the hospital, he's had a stroke and he's not conscious, but would you go by and pray for him? And I said, sure. So I thought I would meet the family there, but when I got there was no one there except the man. And he laid in bed, his eyes were kind of glossed over. If any of you guys have been around people who were close to death, you'll know that look of kind of distant in their eyes. And he was laying there. We didn't know if he could hear. We didn't know. He wasn't responding to anything. So I was there. I figured, it kind of that weight came on me to say, you know what? This man is in the final stages of his life. And you're the preacher. What are you going to do, And so I talked to him for a while. There was really no response, but I didn't know if he could hear me or not. I didn't know, so I'm going to take whatever chance I can. So I talked to him about the plan of salvation. I told him about Christ. He had never gone to church, ever. Had never accepted Christ, and I prayed with him at the end of his life, and just actually a few hours later, he passed away. When I met with the family about the funeral, I said, what can you tell me about him? Can you share any fond memories? And they just said, none. We don't have any. As a matter of fact, we called him Grumps. That was what the family called him, Grumps. Not Grandpa, Pawpaw, Grumps. Every time we were around him, he was mean. He was grumpy. He never had anything nice to say about anyone. And then they start telling me stories about when he would get mad and throw things and say things, and people in the family that wouldn't go by and see him, and people that wouldn't be there at the funeral because of stuff that he said. And I just heard one bad thing after another, and I'm thinking, I walk away and had zero notes. Zero. I thought, how am I going to do a funeral for a guy they call Grumps? How do you do that? I'm supposed to talk about the greatest stuff, the kindness of the man or things that he had accomplished. No, I had nothing. So I had to do a funeral ceremony, the first one I've ever done, where I really didn't talk about the guy at all. There wasn't anything to say about him. I made jokes about them calling him Grumps, and everybody thought it was funny, but the fact is, it was a sad service for a person who lived a life and made no friends and made no achievements of success in his life. So I had to spend the time talking about family and friends and the importance of having those people in our lives and the importance of living a life that would have a legacy at the end instead of living a life that's just over. And folks, that's my comment to you guys. I know we can stop and we can think about our lives and man, I shouldn't have done that, But if you're known as a negative, grumpy person, snap out of it, because no one enjoys that. Well, I'm just being real. I understand that. Be real then. But if you want to be real, be real. But there's some things that you got to learn not to say and some things that you got to learn to say, all right? If it's negative, keep it to yourself. If you're continually thinking negative thoughts about people and commenting about how negative they are and how negative things are, keep it to yourself. I know that even I do that sometimes. I know my kids are the first ones to say, wow, that was, that was kind of off color, or that was this way, or that was that way. And they notice those things in me sometimes. And it helps me understand that sometimes I have negative things and sometimes I talk when I shouldn't talk. But can I just say, in a church perspective, the negative things that you say about people in the church or to the church, it hurts other people. It hurts other people. I know of people who don't attend church anymore because of negative things that have been said. We had a family that was attending our church. If I said their name, some of you guys would know them. And their son was about 45, 55 years old. And they said, please pray for him. He hasn't been to church since his teens. And we began to pray, and their son came. He came to church, and he was involved in church. He helped out with stuff. He was a big motorcycle guy, so we got to know him about that kind of stuff. Kevin kind of reached out and made friends with him. Well, as time went by, we had some things happen in the church and stuff, and the family got mad, and they left. They went back to the church that they came from. And this young man, he stopped going to the church for a while. A long time. And we reached out to him and said, hey, man, what's going on, in church? And he says, all the stuff that's going on and the things that are being said, he says, it just reminded me of why I quit going to church when I was in my teenage years. It reminded me of why I quit going to church when I was a teenager. Can I tell you, I wasn't around when he was a teenager. So it couldn't have been me that made him mad. But it was things that he heard his parents say. It was the same attitudes they had when he was a teenager that when he was 55 years in his life. And what they said were driving that boy away from God. I don't want the things that I say in my life or in my home to drive my family away from God. And it does if you're continually negative. Now, I'm just being a pastor to you guys now, okay? I know you guys are looking at me like, hey, can you let us go? Yes, I'm going to. But what I want to say is this. Find those things that we can become. Write those things down. And this year, make the commitment to what I am going to be, not just what I'm going to do. And it will transform your life. Bow your heads with me.